All right, we have a new heading. This is part 3. Sorry, I forgot to mention last one was part 2. Mendel's experiments. Suppose you had a garden full of pea plants and you wanted to study the inheritance of traits. In other words, how organisms pass traits from one to another. What would you do? Mendel decided to cross plants with opposite forms of a trait. For example, tall and short plants. He started his experiments with purebred plants. A purebred plant is one that always produces offspring with the same form of a trait as the parent. For example, purebred short pea plants always produce short offspring. Purebred tall pea plants always produced tall offspring. You can also think of, you may have heard of purebred in reference to animals, a purebred dog or cat, for instance. Its parents were the same type and its great-grandparents were the same type. And if purebred animals breed with each other, then you get offspring, or puppies in this case, that will look like the parents as well. To produce purebred plants, Mendel allowed peas with one particular trait to self-pollinate for many generations. By using purebred plants, Mendel knew that the offspring's traits would always be identical to that of the parents. So that was important for him to start with these purebred plants, because then he knew these characteristics are true to this plant. There's nothing else mixed in with it. In his first experiment, Mendel crossed purebred tall plants with purebred short plants. He called these parent plants the parental generation, or P generation. He called the offspring from this cross the first filial generation, or the F1 generation. The word filial means son in Latin. So see how he crossed these plants. They were both purebred, purebred tall, purebred short. You can see the results of Mendel's first cross below. To Mendel's surprise, all of the offspring in the F1 generation were tall, despite the fact that one of the parent plants was short. None of the offspring were short. The shortness trait had disappeared. So if you look in this first example, you see here's the P generation, the parental generation. Here's the purebred tall plant, crossing, that's what that X means. The purebred short plant produced, it shows 2, but produced, many more plants, obviously. It's just trying to show the result here of 2 tall plants. We know nothing else except for what they look like. Crossing pea plants. When Mendel crossed purebred tall and short pea plants, all the offspring in the F1 generation were tall. In the F2 generation, 3/4 of the plant were tall, 1/4 was short. So let's read about that. Mendel let the plants in the F1 generation grow and allowed them to self-pollinate. Remember, the pollen from one flower lands on the pollen of that same flower, or a flower of the same plant. The results of this experiment also surprised Mendel. And the plants in the F2 second filial generation were a mix of tall and short plants. This occurred even though none of the F1 parent plants were short. The shortness trait had reappeared. Mendel counted the number of tall and short plants in the F2 generation. He found that about 3/4 of the plants were tall, while 1/4 of the plants were short. So let's look at the diagram here. So he allowed these plants to self-pollinate. It shows them, crossing, because they're all the same. They all have the same traits. And it's just this plant crossed with itself, you could say. And what happened was 3/4 of the offspring were tall, showed that tall trait, and 1/4 showed the short trait. So this short trait in this plant here showed up again. This is going to make more sense when we do some more reading. There's a reason this happens, and it's very predictable.